It's just coming up to 6:20. By the year 2050, an estimated 170,000 New Zealanders are expected to be suffering from some form of Alzheimer's disease. Currently there is no cure, but one leading expert says he's confident that will change. Professor Peter St George-Hyslop is credited with discovering the genes which cause early onset Alzheimer's, and says fighting the disease is more complex than battling cancer. He's in the country, briefly, to accept an award for his Alzheimer's research and joins us this morning. Kia ora, good morning, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the award. What does this kind of accolade, which I appreciate came somewhat out of the blue, mean for someone like you?
So I think it actually has two levels of significance. So there's a personal one, meaning that I and my team have been recognised for making a contribution, which is obviously fantastic. But I think there's a larger significance in that what it means is people, society, important structures within our society are beginning to pay attention to this sort of problem, which is going to be very huge in the coming years.
I want to get on to some of the detail about your study in a moment, but I understand you are based in Cambridge and in Canada. You oscillate between the two, but you effectively got a call out of the blue and made your way to New Zealand.
Yes, I was actually going home from my lab in Toronto to my home in Toronto on the public transport system, and I got a series of emails saying that I'd had a voicemail in Cambridge and then one in Toronto, and then a bunch of emails from a David King, who I'd never heard of. And the fact that I got 6 things all in a row told me it was something important. So I stopped. I looked through the message, realised that it actually was possibly something important. So I emailed him and said, can I call you back in about 15 minutes when I've got home?
Wow.
And then I'm here, right.
Fantastic. Yes. What is it that makes Alzheimer's such a complicated disease?
I think there are two things. So the most important reason that it's very complicated is that it affects the brain, which is the most complicated organ in the body. Another thing that makes it very complicated is that it's a disorder which happens very late in life. So the changes that occur over a long period of time are quite subtle, and sorting that out becomes quite difficult.
It is going to be something, as we just identified, that is going to become more and more of an issue, especially with an ageing population, I would have thought.
Yes.
How much of an issue is it going to be?
Absolutely huge. So the numbers of people are going to double over the next 15 years and triple by sort of now 2050. The cost of this is huge. Simply looking after patients, I think the projections for New Zealand are about $1.67 billion a year, which is huge. And that's simply looking after patients. That's not curing them. And then there's another dimension which is very difficult to calculate, which is the human impact. So this disorder really disrupts families. The patients lose contact, they lose their human qualities and are unable to interact with family members, and family members aren't able to sort of interact with their grandparents or parents, and it really has a very horrible quality of life towards the end.
Does that add a dimension of pressure to the research you do? I imagine it almost being like a countdown clock where you're looking at this ageing population, baby boomers who are starting to move into the latter stages of their lives, and you're thinking this is going to affect so many people.
I think that pressure has begun to be noticed by people like the Ryman Foundation and also governments worldwide. And so in the last few years, there has become a sort of a sea change as people have said, you know, this is going to be a massive public health problem unless we get behind it. But several of us who have been working in this field have been aware of that for some time. So that pressure has always been there and it's not any different.
What are the prospects for a cure?
I think they're actually very good. So when I started this research, or when I saw my first patient with Alzheimer's disease as a medical student in the 1970s, all that was known was a short paragraph in the textbook of medicine which said it was a rare disorder, unknown cause, etc. And we've gone from that skeletal understanding of what the disease looked like and some of its pathology, now to having a very good understanding of some of the causes and some of the mechanisms. And those are beginning to throw up some ideas about how we might use that information for diagnosis, particularly to diagnose people early and then begin to treat them. And I think it's also thrown up some ideas which we're now chasing down about how we could try to treat the disease, or stop it, slow it.
What else needs to happen?
Well, a lot more needs to go on. We need a few more details about the disease mechanisms, and then we need to try various different treatments to see which ones work. Because it's not clear immediately which ones will work and which ones work. So they need to be tested. And that's a process that takes many years, sort of 5 years for a typical drug to go from being validated in the laboratory to actually going through clinical trials and being shown to be effective.
It's a crude question, but can you put a timeline on this sort of thing? Do we know when we could potentially expect a cure?
I think we're not really likely to have anything in the next 5 years that cures the disease. But I think within the next 5 to 15 years, that's an achievable goal.
It's wonderful to speak. Thank you so much for giving us your time this morning. Professor St George-Hyslop.
It's 25.